So I'm going to break down each of the key components and attributes that you need to develop in order to perform a handstand. Now, we're not just focusing on any old handstand. Your priority when you are learning a handstand should be to make this thing look as beautiful and straight as possible. That should be your objective. And so that's going to be the main focus behind all of the attributes that we're trying to develop and that I'm going to be talking about in this video. So the first thing I want to talk about is hand position, and we're going to keep this simple, and I'm going to explain some of the whys as well. So fingers are pointing forwards. Even when I was learning a handstand, I had a tendency to point my fingers kind of out slightly, but you want your index finger, ensure that is pointing forwards. And you want to get your hands shoulder width apart, sometimes even narrower. That's especially going to be useful if you want to start to learn one-armed handstands, but shoulder width, not too wide, fingers pointing forwards, okay? So that's how you want it. Now, once we're in that position, we need to focus on arm position. It's very important to ensure that your arms are going to stay locked in a strong position. So, for that to happen, elbow pits need to be forwards. As you do that, you're going to feel a contraction in the rotator cuffs and maybe even the lower trap slightly because the shoulder blades will come down. But it's very important to have those elbow pits pointing forwards, because if they're flared out, they can bend, you can lose tension on the hands, and that's how you can fail. But if we lock everything forwards, elbow pits forwards, fingers pointing forwards, it's going to be very hard for your elbows to kind of move from that position, and it's going to ensure that you keep pressure under your knuckles on your hands. So that's really important. Once you've got that position of elbow pits forwards, fingers forwards, just make sure that you are focusing on keeping pressure on the pads of your hand and also under the knuckles, and just gripping the floor ever so slightly. So if I demonstrate that now, just going into all those key points, fingers forwards, elbow pits forwards, lean forward slightly until I feel pressure under the knuckles, pull the fingertips into the floor. That is a nice strong position, and you're going to be super sturdy in your handstand if you start to internalize that right from the off. In terms of mobility, I'm going to link a video below that's going to show you some drills that will help you to develop some mobility in your wrists and expose your hands and wrists to the multitude of different movements that could occur so that you can control them. But in terms of wrist strength, we're going to start with a very basic move, the frog stand. And this is where we can start to put into practice some of our hand positioning that we've just learned. And so let's just go into this. What we're going to do is fingers pointing forwards, nice tight grip onto the floor. So leaning forwards, I've got the pressure in the hands, and then I'm going to get into kind of a squat with my thighs pushing hard into my triceps. And then from here, I'm just going to lean my shoulders forward slightly. And as I do so, pressure is under, and that's what you want. You want the pressure under the knuckles and your forearm to be straight, at which point you're ready to flick one toe, flick the other toe. And here, this is going to be a great drill for you to start to develop some wrist strength. When you've done one toe down, other toe down, go safely back into a squat. So there you have it, your first drill to start to develop some wrist strength. So now we're going to start to focus more on the line of your handstand. In order for you to have a really good line, one thing that we need to be able to do is open up the chest. You may have heard that term before, an open chest. And so we're going to develop that now, because that's going to be really important to ensure that you've got that line. The other important thing that you need to be able to learn is the hollow body. That's going to ensure that you've got control through your handstand and you're linking the upper and lower body. Now, in terms of opening up the chest, this is what we're going to do. Get yourself a barbell. It's going to be very simple. Place your hands on the barbell, like so, and you can go kind of in the same width that you would in a handstand. Then I'm just going to bend the knees slightly. Barbell is kind of at eye level. I'm just going to drop the hips back and focus on my ears coming down and past my upper arm. And so I'm just pushing the chest through, keeping the tailbone back. I'm in this nice hinge. And as you can see, that's already kind of going into a nice line naturally. I'm also thinking here, shoulder blades pinched together, and I'm pushing into the barbell in order to ensure that I'm shrugging, but that's something that we're going to cover now. But what we want to do is get into this position and focus on breathing, 4 breath cycles, into the rib cage, nice and deep, and out. And that's going to help you develop the flexibility that you need in order to get into that nice straight line. So in the quest for that line, and in order to ensure that your handstand is as strong as possible and as stable as possible, you want to be able to elevate the shoulder blade as much as possible. So it's basically focus on shoulder to ears. And so in order to drill that, what we want to do is find yourself a wall. Now that we've worked on opening up the chest, just fingers pointing forwards. I'm going to get into my hinge. And then here, I'm just focusing on pushing through the palm of my hand, doing a shrug before I kind of release like so, and then pushing hard, nice big shrug, hold, and then release slowly. And so you want to do, as a beginner, I'd say 8 to 10 reps to really learn that pattern. Now, we're starting on the wall because it should be easier, but once you have made progress with that, you can bring this to the floor. And so, what we want to do is get into this position here. Hopefully you got the flexibility for this. This is why it can be hard. So get yourself into kind of an A-frame, and then we're doing this A-frame shrugs, release back down, big shrug, keeping the chin tucked, back down, and another big shrug, okay? And that's going to help you generate as much pushing force as possible against the ground, which is going to keep you really sturdy and stable in your handstand. So the next one, for want of a better term, is hip control. And what we're trying to do here is we are trying to get you to understand how to move your hips into position in the context of keeping your arms straight and flat on the ground. The Frogger is essentially how I got my first handstand. It was how I got into a position to be able to a handstand. So it's a very important skill to learn. So let me show you the Frogger. Get into a comfortable squat for you. My squat is not aesthetic at all, but a comfortable squat for you. And then we're going to place fingertips out in front of you like so. Fingers pointing forwards. We still want to internalize that. Elbows pointing forwards. Okay, that's going to lock the arm. And then all we're doing is we're just popping the hips up and bringing them down to the outside of the hands with control. So it looks like this. Lean forwards, hop up and down. Now you'll see that as I do this, I'm trying to kind of float. So my hips can actually stay up because I'm really pushing through the hands and I'm keeping tension in my lower abdominals. So something that's going to be really useful for you to learn here is a skill called compression. And I actually go through that in the LSIT video that I'll link below. But that's going to be really useful for you to help create tension through that lower part of the abdominals so that you can keep this movement as slow and controlled as possible. What we don't want is this. No control, you're never going to get your handstand. And let me just show you what I mean by how this helps me to get a handstand. Because eventually this movement progresses into you being able to get the hips higher and higher off the floor. And that's going to be really important in terms of you generating that body awareness that you need in order to perform your handstand and in order for you to know where that position is, where your hips are over your hands. So if I just go through a low Frogger now, then a slightly higher one, and then I'll try the handstand on this one. And so that all comes from the Frogger. So there you have it, guys. The main key components and drills that you need to learn in order to master your handstand. Check the description below for a bit more of a comprehensive write-up in terms of protocols that you can use. Otherwise, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in the next video.